Yo, what's up? Welcome to Kind of Funny Games Daily for Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Blessing Adeoye Jr. Joining me is Tim fucking Geddes.
Forever, bless. It felt like it was pre-3. Now it's post-3. We're
Now
just
it's post
here.
3.
E3 is over, man. We did it. How are you feeling? A whole entire week plus of insane coverage.
Tim, I'm so exhausted.
Yeah.
Like, it was such a fun week. It's been nonstop, and it's a good exhausted that I'm feeling right now. I feel like we just did something,
hmm
which is awesome. How do you feel?
I feel the exact same way, man. I think that as a team, we've never done better work during E3. Every year we just get better, and they gave us a lot to do, a lot to react to, a lot to cover,
Yeah.
a lot of fun stuff. And I think there was definitely a lot of bummers and a lot of letdowns and a lot of things that didn't need to happen. But that was offset with a plentiful amount of things that are real big banger announcements.
Yeah, I mean, tell me more about how you feel about how this E3 went overall, because of course, right now is the last day. I know the Bandai Namco presentation is going on right now. That is just House of Ashes, which is why we're not live reacting to it. And then later on, there's still the GameSpot Play for All showcase, which is going to go live right after this episode, this live episode of KFGD, which I encourage people to go check out. But now that we're here and Kind of Funny's E3 coverage is closing out, like, how's E3 been for you? How do you feel about how the show went overall?
I have a lot, a lot of thoughts that I kind of want to think about a little bit more, and maybe do a games cast in the coming weeks. Really, kind of talking about like doing like a postmortem on E3 and Summer Game Fest, and what we all kind of want to see in the future. Because I do think that there were many positive steps taken forward here, but there were a couple steps back, and I think a lot of it has to do with the at this point very obvious rivalry between the E3 side on the ESA and then the Summer Game Fest
Mhm.
with Jeff Keighley, and some of the tweets back and forth that we've seen, or at least going one way from Jeff to E3 for the most part. It's clear that that things are not on in parallel. They're not together, and with that, I think both sides have kind of had to scramble to bulk up their offerings, and I think that was to the detriment of both sides, really. So I
Mhm.
want to see a world where they kind of work a little bit more together, and that they're, like we've been saying for a long time, that we see kind of a ringleader, somebody really organizing all this stuff, and somebody with to be able to make the calls of being like, I'm going to look at the briefing of what you're going to have in this showcase, and we'll decide should there be a showcase or not.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe talk about like, okay, how are we going to communicate this? If you're going to have a commercial, how do we talk about this in a way that it's just a commercial? In the case of something like Capcom or even Gearbox, where it's like, cool, you guys can do this, but we gotta talk about this differently. We can't make this look like it's going to be a Summer Games Fest kickoff or a Xbox showcase or something along the lines of Square Enix. We got to do something different with it. I will say for me, zoomed out from the actual analytical thing of, what is E3? How is E3 doing? I will say this has been such a fun week of covering content for Kind of Funny. Like, this
Mhm.
is my first official E3 with Kind of Funny, and so I've actually gotten to go through all the motions of going through working during the weekend, doing shows back to back to back to back, being live all day, and having all the fun of hanging out with y'all and then hanging out with the community, which has been such a really cool thing that I've absolutely adored. And then at the same time, being able to tune into the E3 stream and seeing Greg Miller killing it out there, seeing Michael Heim kill it out there, Jackie Jing and Golden Boy and everybody out there doing their thing, on the big stage. I mentioned it Sunday during one of our live reactions that it fills me with pride. And yeah, like, looking back at it, it's been such an incredible weekend just to see friends having this moment together and being able to shine together.
Yeah, and more friends than ever have in a moment, right? I think that's the
Yeah.
best thing going of there being two things with Summer Game Fest and E3 is like there are so many more stages for people to share and for people to have and platforms, and the amount of different groups that have been reacting. I think it's awesome that there's Kind of Funny and Easy Allies and Giant Bomb and now Nextlander, and it just the list goes on and on of like the different groups that are all kind of reacting. And I love that the communities can kind of choose where they want to go, even depending on conference to conference, if they want to bounce between them all. And it's really cool. So much fun offerings and stuff. And yeah.
Yep. Tim, there's still more to talk about with E3 because today's stories include a Nintendo E3 wrap up, Cyberpunk coming back to the PlayStation Store, and what the fuck is going on with Everwild, because this is Kind of Funny Games Daily, each and every weekday at 10 a.m. live right here, except for today because we're going live at 2:30 p.m. Because of how Nintendo Direct and everything shook out. But live right here on twitch.tv/Kind of Funny Games, we run you through the nerdy news you need to know about. If you're watching live, you can correct us when we get stuff wrong by going to kindoffunny.com/you're wrong. If you don't want to watch live, you can watch later on youtube.com/kindafunnygames, roosterteeth.com, or you can listen later on podcast services around the globe by searching for Kinda Funny Games Daily. To be a part of the show, to patreon.com/kindafunnygames, where bronze members or above get to write in, and silver members or above get the show ad-free with the exclusive daily post show. Housekeeping for you in case you missed it, there's a bunch of E3 content to catch up on. The Kinda Funny Gamescast reaction to the Nintendo Direct is now live. It's me, it's Tim, it's Janet Garcia, it's Barrett Courtney, it's Andy Cortez, and it's Greg Miller, all hyped about Mario Party Superstars and Metroid Dread and all the goodies we got from the Nintendo Direct that we're about to talk about. Also, PS I Love You XOXO featuring Janet Garcia is also live. We talk about what E3 means for PlayStation, and we build our own fake PlayStation E3 press conference. It was a really good time. It was a really fun topic, and so go check that out. You can catch both of those on youtube.com/kindafunnygames and on podcast services around the globe. Also, remember, you can catch our live reactions to all the biggest E3 showcases uploaded on YouTube right now. And then as I'm going through this housekeeping, Barrett is literally typing. He's literally typing. I can see him saying something. Tim and Barrett will be breaking down. Barrett, type faster. Zelda
Breath of the Wild 2 trailer. We're going to be doing a breakdown to it. It won't be live. It will just go up on youtube.com/kindafunnygames. So stay tuned for that. But Barrett's been looking into all the theories, having his own theories. We're just going to kind of go semi frame by frame and figure out what we think's going on in the hotly anticipated sequel.
Hell yeah. Thank you to our Patreon producers, Donovan Harkness and Blackjack. Today we're brought to you by Burrow, but I'll tell you about that later. For now, let's begin with what is, and forever will be, the Roper Report. It's time for some news. We have 4 stories today.
A baker's dozen.
Starting with story number 1, Nintendo's biggest E3 headlines. I'm pulling from Andy Robinson at VGC to help catch us up. Nintendo's E3 2021 Direct didn't disappoint in terms of surprises, with the platform holder reviving more than one series that hasn't seen a release in over a decade. At the top of the list is Metroid Dread, the first mainline 2D entry in 19 years, which its developer says will end a story arc that began in the 80s. Nintendo also revealed a new Advance Wars title, which will remake the original strategy games from the Game Boy Advance, and a new installment in the WarioWare franchise. The Direct concluded with the first look at The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 since its announcement 2 years ago. The sequel will feature an expanded world, Nintendo said, and is targeting a release in 2022. Finally, Nintendo will celebrate Zelda's 35th anniversary this year with a special edition Game & Watch, which includes the original 2 Zelda titles and Link's Awakening. We also got Mario Party Superstars coming to Nintendo Switch later this year. We got Kazuya from Tekken coming to Smash Bros. Ultimate as a DLC character. We got Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater being ported to all formats. We got Super Monkey Ball, Banana Mania, that's been officially announced, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy is coming to Nintendo Switch. It will be a streaming title on the platform. Tim, now that we've had a few hours to kind of calm down from the hype of Nintendo Direct, how are you feeling about it?
I mean, honestly, I've only gotten more stoked on it. I think when you really look at Nintendo's lineup from here till 2022, honestly, it is the most exciting time to be a Nintendo fan than we've had in a while. I love that this is a ridiculous quantity of the high B to A tier Nintendo titles. And honestly, we're revisiting a whole bunch of franchises in ways that I never expected Nintendo to actually go through with and do. But going back to WarioWare, getting a Mario Party that is the OGs remade, it's like everything about Mario Party Superstars is just like, wow, y'all are nailing it. This is a dream game in so many ways. And on top of that, Advance Wars, like WarioWare, these things coming back, like there really is this like GBA resurgence going on. Like we're getting a sequel to Metroid Fusion, and it is Metroid Dread, a game that was officially announced like over like 15 years ago. Like it's insane that we're actually getting this game, and I'm super freaking excited about it. Mercury Steam's making it, and they knocked it out of the park with Samus Returns a couple years ago on the 3DS. It coming this year, October. Like I like how many release dates we got from Nintendo, right? Where we like it from September to November, it is about to be like weekly releases from them. And if you are a fan of multiplayer Nintendo, it's about to be a really damn good time.
Yeah, I think that's my thing. This is such a fun and interesting Nintendo Direct because it was a lot of left field announcements, right? It was a new WarioWare coming out for Switch, which is an awesome thing. Many fans have been asking for a WarioWare Switch. It was Mario Party Superstars, which was this kind of unexpected thing, but a really cool announcement. And as I was watching the direct, I was keeping my eyes on chat to see what people were saying about it, and it was very interesting to see how divided people were. I think this is one of the directs where, for me, it had a lot of things that spoke to me, but I can definitely understand people who are like, yeah, there was nothing for me in this direct because there wasn't that one thing, or like there wasn't those, I guess, few things that bring people in as really hyped announcements. We had Metroid Dread, which is going to speak to that audience, and which is going to be hyped for a certain amount of people. I know that was hyped for you. That was a bit hyped for me. That was hyped for multiple people in the call. You had Mario's Party Superstars, which spoke to multiple of us. You had WarioWare, and then you had something like Advance Wars, which definitely spoke to a few of us in the call. But even me, I look at that and I'm like, wow, what a cool announcement. Not necessarily for me, but I know that people who love Advanced Wars are going to love that, and that's a really cool thing. But I think that speaks to, yeah, it's a very interesting one. It puts us in a very interesting place, because that brings up the question of, all right, so what is going on with the big titles in the Switch Pro? We got more Breath of the Wild 2, which is very exciting. I was freaking out about that. Absolutely loved what they showed. I'm excited to see what you and Barrett had to say about it in that trailer breakdown. But for those, again, like, big titles that we can look forward to for the future, for the next 3D Mario, for Bayonetta 3, for Metroid Prime 4, right? Like, what does this direct mean for those? Do you feel like where do you stand with that?
I think it means really good things. Honestly, I think that this direct is a very, very clear, obvious sign of where Nintendo's at. Nintendo Japan makes decisions. They're the ones running the ship always. So Nintendo of America is just kind of the ones there to kind of fall in line and do what is told to them, right? And looking at the list of games that we see here, some of them look a little more rough than others. And I think that when we look at something like Mario Party Superstars, I was actually really impressed with the visuals of the game and how much love and care is being put into it. And then you look at things like Advance Wars, and it's like, okay, maybe not so much. And even Metroid, I'm like, I don't know that this is like the visual showpiece type title that people might have wanted or expected, but I think that's totally okay. This is their tier of games. I was saying this earlier in one of our reactions, that this lineup reminds me a lot of not Nintendo's 2017 lineup, which was Mario Odyssey, Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then like smaller titles like ARMS. It's more like the 2019 that we got, where, we got Pokemon Sword and Shield. Obviously, that's a big deal, a core Pokemon title. But then it was Luigi's Mansion 3 and Zelda's Link's Awakening. And this lineup we have this year, the rest of this year, reminds me of that, where it's like, let's fill in the gaps with all. Nintendo has so many franchises. It's not like we go in and we're like, oh, I hope this one thing is here. We're going in and there's like 20 different things that we're hoping for. And I think that any way you shake it, this direct had a lot of those things, and it might not speak to you. Obviously, I want Metroid Prime 4. I want a new Nintendo EAD project. Anything that they do, whether it's Mario, Donkey Kong, or otherwise, like I want that over most of what we saw here. But with the amount of what we saw here, I think they really did a good job, and I think that this is perfectly teeing up. Yeah, Switch Pro 2022 with Breath of the Wild, next year's Nintendo E3. That's when we're going to start seeing a lot of the bigger projects be talked about and announced. And that's just where we're at right now. Nintendo got hit hard with Corona, hard.
Yep.
And this is a perfect example of them making the best of that. I think they're doing a much better job than I expected.
Yeah, I think this direct for me did what I really wanted, which was fill out what the rest of this year looks like. Because, for Nintendo, especially last year, there was that thing of, okay, man, we're having a video game drought. We're getting our Paper Mario game, and we're getting our Hyrule Warriors game, but outside of that, it felt like there was a lot of emptiness going on toward the latter half of last year. And this year, you're absolutely right. It does mirror that year that we got things like Luigi's Mansion and a lot of similar games. And I'm very much looking forward to what this fall has for Nintendo when you factor in, yes, Mario Party Superstars, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, WarioWare, and everything around it. Now, Tim, I want to bring in a question from Connor Kilmurray, who writes into patreon.com/kindafunnygames, just like you can, and says, hey there, KFGD crew. So the Switch Pro looks like it's being held off till 2022 to tie in with Breath of the Wild 2, right? It seems weird that they would launch it without a major tentpole game to tie into it. Or do you think they launch the Switch Pro this holiday anyway and build up the base even more before Breath of the Wild 2 drops? Thanks for the insight in Game Daily.
I legitimately don't think that the Switch Pro needs to be tied to Zelda or any title at all. like Nintendo in the past, when you look at like what they've done, it's like if it lines up, they'll use the marketing to just kind of have that double win there. But if it doesn't, they're just going to release the Nintendo Switch Pro and it's going to sell out no matter how many they have available. Even if it was in pandemic time, it'd be hard to get your hands on one. And having it tie into Zelda and stuff, it's like they don't really need to do that. Zelda's going to sell better than other Zelda games ever have because that's just what's been proven on the Switch so far. That keeps happening. And the sequel to Breath of the Wild's going to have a really high attach rate, whether it's Switch Pro or otherwise. Having said that, I'm back to not really having a guess here. I don't really have any educated hypothesis on is the Switch Pro this year or next year. I honestly think it could be any, and it wouldn't be a big surprise to me because we're already at a point that games would benefit from having that stuff, and it's like holding that for this giant big experience, I think is silly in some way, right? It's just like we're getting so many games from Nintendo, and if you just want more people to be able to get that Switch Pro, to get a Switch in general, because you imagine majority of these are going to be, or all of them, I assume potentially are going to be backwards compatible on the entire Switch ecosystem.
Of course. Yeah, I think that's the thing is when we talk about the Switch Pro possibly having a lineup to it, I think the fact of the matter is the Switch Pro is probably going to be ready before The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be ready, especially with the way they talked about Breath of the Wild 2. They said that they're targeting 2022, but they said that with this era of not being sure, like 2022 is the goal. And I feel like if that is kind of the language you're attaching to it, that thing could easily slip into 2023. And as Nintendo holding this piece of hardware that you probably want to get out probably a little bit soonish because the Switch has been out for so long, it's not necessarily worth holding that for anything. You're gonna have maybe Pokemon Legends Arceus coming out in January, and something like Mario and Rabbids,
which is crazy.
Yeah, which is crazy. But you're gonna have games that you can maybe tie to that in order to boost that marketing. But for Nintendo and the Switch, people are going to show up regardless. And when Breath of the Wild 2 eventually does come out, people are going to show up for it regardless. And again, like as Nintendo, you have plenty of titles you can pull in. You have an ongoing library of bigger games that are going to come out over the next few years. I'm at the point now where I'm not convinced anymore that those things are going to line up in terms of launch because of how hard development is and how much quarantine has kind of screwed with development, especially over at Nintendo, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's going to be interesting when we see all this shakeout. I do think that it's fun that we're in this place where we have Horizon for PlayStation, we have Halo Infinite for Xbox, and we have Breath of the Wild for Nintendo, where all of them are like, hey, we're going to tell you as much information as we can, and we're aiming for this, we're aiming for that. And it's just like, that's language we haven't really heard before with these type of games. So I think it's kind of cool, and it is just a sign of where we're at. But Horizon and Halo, both of them targeting 2021. This is targeting 2022. It's just the reality.
Now, Tim, we're at E3 day last, right? I got an interesting question here from Anonymous, who writes in and says, "Who won E3?" Tim, who won E3?
I feel like this is always a fun question to talk about, right? And I feel like since the dawn of time, essentially, it's been a silly question because depending on the type of games that you like to play, it's going to be a different answer for everybody. But that's the fun of this, right? I think that this year in particular, it's probably the most difficult to really choose a winner in some ways, just because there were so many different conferences. And I feel like there's just less. While there were more showcases, there are less showcases actually in the conversation of winners. In traditional years, we'd at least have 3. We would at least have Microsoft, PlayStation, and Nintendo. And then it's like, if Bethesda had a killer show, they'd be in the conversation. If Ubisoft pulled some shit out of their ass, there'd be some conversation there. But where we're at right now, it's kind of like, if we're just talking about the showcases, it's really just Nintendo versus Xbox. Like, I don't think that anybody...
You wouldn't throw Summer Games Fest kickoff in there at all?
I wouldn't. They had Elden Ring. It's like when you really, and I think that there was a lot of really good done. And I think Summer Game Fest did a lot of fantastic stuff. And I can't wait to see that continue to grow. And Kickoff Live is a great thing that I want to see every year at E3 or around E3. But I think that if we're talking about like what showcase won, it's between Microsoft and Nintendo. And if I'm going between those two, like, honestly, I think it's fairly a tie in what they accomplished for the audiences they're trying to accomplish it for. And I think that both had some big major announcements, and I think that they both were lacking in other ways. And I think that they have a lot of almost one for one things of what they have versus don't have and all that. But I do think at the end of the day, broken record here, if I had to choose one, it goes to Microsoft because of Game Pass and because of how they sold it. And these we're just watching commercials and grading commercials. And that was a fucking fantastic commercial for Game Pass.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Xbox fully. I think Xbox kind of easily took it, right? Nintendo being second place for me, but for me, Xbox did what I think they needed to do in order to make me, as somebody who's not really ever been fully in their ecosystem, to go, wow, they really got their shit together and they really got an exciting future. You know, and like, of course, Nintendo has the Switch. We've loved the Switch forever. Other platforms, you know, to each their own in terms of how much you enjoy them. Xbox, I feel like, has had this ongoing narrative of climbing up from the depths that were that 2013 disaster with the launch of the Xbox One. And over the course of this whole last generation, it's felt like they've been trying to kind of gain ground. And in recent years, they've been gaining that ground more and more. And I think, you know, the audiences have been believing what they're doing more and more and more. But I think for me, this was the one where I was like, okay, yeah, like you guys have a lineup. You guys have a pretty exciting fall this fall when you look at both the big games and when you look at everything else surrounding that, right? Like when you look at the Forza Horizon 5s, when you look at Halo Infinite and how they're treating that and how exciting it was to sit down with you, Andy, and Snowmike Mike and watch the Halo multiplayer reveal and see how hype people were about that. When you look at 12 minutes and how that's launching on Game Pass along with Hades, the Ascent, you have Psychonauts 2, which is an Xbox exclusive. Like they've really done a good job stating their case in terms of what Xbox is and what the future of Xbox is. And then you get into things like the announcement of the Outer Worlds 2. You get into things like putting a date in another look on Starfield. You know, you get into them casting vision for the future. And I think overall they just did a fantastic, beautiful job of really laying out the case of what is Xbox and why is Xbox the way to play. And it all culminates in that Phil Spencer speech that he gave towards the end of it, which I thought was very clear and very powerful in terms of how much they believe in their own vision. And so for me, it was Xbox, and of course, it's E3, and so it's going to be to each their own. You know, some people are going to say Summer Games Fest because it had the biggest announcement with Elden Ring for a lot of people. But I think for me, Xbox is where it's at in terms of who I think won E3.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just did a really good job of, like you said, kind of selling who they are and what they're doing. And I think that we've, for years, kind of been like, this is going to be the E3 that the Xbox shows up. And I still don't think that this was it. I still think that they have a lot to prove of putting out, like, actually having the games come out. Like, they did answer the question of where are the games? And it's like, well, here they are. But now we still need to get to that point that actual cadence of release is coming. Like, we're still going to go essentially this entire year without the major first party releases coming to Game Pass. And once that kicks off with Halo, then it kind of feels like it's going to be nonstop. Boom, 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 boom. Every quarter, we're like getting some major releases. And that's why it's like thinking about what next year's E3 might look like for Xbox. That's crazy when there's more known quantities, when there's more highly reviewed games, hopefully, that people understand, like, damn, Game Pass isn't just a place with a shit ton of games that I can play for really cheap. It's a place with a shit ton of exclusive, extremely high quality games that I can play really cheap, in addition to all the other value adds and stuff. But then the third party side of it, right? Like even Back for Blood being on Xbox Game Pass, that is huge. We're going to continue to see more deals and decisions made that way to just continue to bolster the power of the Xbox ecosystem and just Xbox game studios as a whole. And especially once Bethesda starts getting fully into the Xbox thing. And when I inevitably think they will drop the Bethesda name, have it just be Xbox and have the Bethesda teams just under them, like that's going to be utterly bonkers.
Mm-hmm. Now, I kind of want to flip the question on its head. Who lost E3? I know it's kind of a negative one, but I feel like this E3, it being kind of as shaky as it was when you look at how multiple different publishers and companies handled it. You look at Capcom, you look at Koch, you look at Gearbox, and there's a lot of room for improvement and understanding of, hey, this is not how you handle an E3. This is not how you approach E3. Like this is these are the things you got to do better next year. For you, do you think there's like a one company that was the shining case of, hey, no, this is not how you do it?
Oh, I mean, I think there's a bazillion examples of that, honestly. And let's stop exaggerating. There's probably like 5 or 6 examples of how not to do it that we saw that are
Yeah.
very clear examples. I don't necessarily think anybody lost E3 in the same way I think that Nintendo and Microsoft won. I do think that because like at the end of the day, it's like Koch Media. It's like, what did they lose? Nobody gave a fuck to begin with. You know what I mean? So it's like we kind of went into it like hoping to see something, and then there wasn't anything there. Square Enix Presents, at least we got Guardians out of it. Like at least we have some more information on some games. I guess if I had to choose a loser, it would be Square, because they were the ones that had showed the most things that people were excited for in a disappointing fashion when it comes to Final Fantasy Origins and Babylon's Fall. I think those are probably the only 2 things shown that people are like, I was waiting for that, and that wasn't good. So yeah, I guess Square's my answer for loser.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. And honestly, like I mentioned this yesterday on Games Daily, that if you showed me a set list, a list of what the announcements at Square Enix's E3 was going to be, I would have been like, oh, this is about to be an A+ conference. And the fact that it was as disappointing as it was, I think speaks to they probably had the most to lose, and they kind of did lose a lot of that. I'm still gonna go for Gearbox though. I think Gearbox was the one for me that just struck me as this is just very bad, like on in pretty much every single case. You know, even some of the news that you could have shared in a way that could have gained some ground for you, even those I felt were bungled in cases like, you know, Godfall being included with you know, the announcement of Homeworld 3, which didn't have to be memed, but because the way you memed it, or because the way you presented it, became a memeable thing for us. You know, combined with us getting shots of that Borderlands movie, but with no new info, with no exciting twist to it. Gearbox for me was the one where I was like, really, man, this is bad. This is really bad.
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
know,
yeah,
I mean,
that's E3.
an interesting thing in like seeing, you know, Twitter's Twitter and like social media. Social media, there's always going to be opinions on every side and takes every way, hot, cold, and everything in between. But, you know, there's a lot of negativity and a lot of snark going around. And then there's a lot of praise and like, hey, let's give a lot of round of applause for all the hard work everyone put in. And I think there's valid sides everywhere, right? It's like, dude, the industry's insane. Like what everyone accomplished this week on every single side of it is just so impressive. Everyone deserves a round of applause for that. Like real talk, like holy shit,
Yeah.
this was nuts. Having said that, I really do think we need to take a look at this. And something that I think people need to understand is there's so many levels that go into these showcases. And especially when we're sitting here critiquing them, it's like there's the announcements that they're making, but it's also how they show off the announcements. So there's a lot of times where I see people kind of critiquing us for being too negative or for like saying that something's boring or whatever. It's like it's on them to show their games off in a way that is up to par. And I think that the biggest losing factor of E3 this year was how low quality and honestly tone deaf so many of the showcases were in terms of engaging with their captive audience. We are all here watching and reacting to more showcases than we ever have because E3 presented them in a way that says they're all equally important. Here's our schedule. Gearbox is getting a showcase. Capcom is getting a showcase. Both of them bungled it. Both of them used this platform or were on this platform and completely missed the mark on how to show off their games. And it's not to say the games they showed weren't good to great to exciting to a bunch of different people, but they really did a disservice to themselves and to us showing games off the way that they did. And I think that we really need to take a look at that and take a look at all the people that did it right, because it's not like it's just, oh man, there's just no answer. Xbox knocked it out of the park. Okay, cool. You don't have the budget that Xbox has to have a show like that. That's totally fine. Because guess what? Guerrilla Collective knocked it out of the park. Day of the Devs knocked it out of the park. Like there was so many examples of how to do a showcase. And there's many more examples of how not to. And it's really not that hard, guys. Just stop and think, would I ever want to watch this? And if the answer is no, don't do it.
Yeah. And for me, you know, when we were sitting here, we're talking about the conferences and we're critiquing these presentations. For me, it's never a thing of critiquing the developers. Like the developers are the saviors of this show. Like the developers are the ones that are out here putting out their art, out here showing, like taking risks, you know, like opening us up to like, you know, seeing the concepts that they're putting out there and they being really, really cool concepts. I remember doing the Koch stream when we were reacting to the Koch Media showcase. At a point, I was like, man, even though this sucks, like shout out to the developers at the very least, because they're out there putting in work. And there was somebody in chat that was like, no, don't shout out the developers. And I'm like, no, shout out the developers, because it's not their fault that this stream sucks. Like the developers are the only saving grace about this. The fact of the matter is that they're being put out there in a way that's not doing them a good service. You have a bunch of cool games to show off. Show them off like they're cool games. Don't have us sit here and watch 2 hours of interviews that are not saying anything. Don't give us a logo and then go back into interviews that are badly framed, badly edited. Like these people are putting in work and you're not doing them justice. And you're Koch Media, a very wealthy organization that has the resources to put together a showcase that's way better than what they did. The fact that they weren't backing up, for me, the fact that they weren't backing up the developers was the thing for me that made it a very upsetting showcase. You know, it's always about show these games off in the best way possible, and I think that's what it comes down to when we're talking about these showcases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just it baffles me, man. I don't understand the decisions made that lead to so many bad showings. And I know that there's a lot at play, and I know that there's a lot of upper management. And again, going back to even the Nintendo Japan versus America thing, it's like there's a lot of differences. And when you look at a lot of the more awkward conferences, a lot of them tend to be from the Japanese developers or the Japanese developers games being put into more American style showcases. That's where it all kind of grinds to a halt. There just needs to be a more cohesive vision, or else this isn't going to fix. Like there needs to be people that are like, we are showing this game this way because that's what's going to suit it best for the most people. And most of the time, that is a pretty simple answer. And for some reason, so many groups just keep fighting against that. And it's 2021. This isn't like this is the first time this has ever happened. Like E3's been around forever. Game showcases have been around for 2 decades. People have been doing this, and so many of them have vastly improved. Looking at Xbox now compared to Xbox even in like 2013, or even like 2012, not to use the worst thing of theirs. Like we're just in the best place ever. And it's so easy for us to look at E3 and be like, this was a shitty E3. No, it wasn't, man. If y'all like, we're all so just like jaded in the now. But if you really look back, it's like we get every single year now, and this is only going to get more and more and more true. We get more banger announcements, more variety in video games every single year. That's just how this industry is working. And it's like our expectations just get higher and higher and higher because the output's just getting more and more and more and higher quality across the board with all the different people making it. And as the showcases, as everybody kind of gobbles each other up and acquires different teams and stuff, like we went from not having a Bethesda conference to having a Bethesda conference to now Bethesda conference being part of Xbox's conference, right? Like so much has shifted. And now all of a sudden there's a little bit more cohesion in how things are going to be presented. At least on the Bethesda Xbox side. So it's like continuing along with that. It's like E3 can be so damn powerful for developers big and small. It just requires a little bit more forethought and organization. And with that, it's like we're never going to fully get away from the bullshit. The bullshit pays the bills. There has to be advertisements that like people are like, who wants this? It's like, well, someone's paying to have it there, and them paying to have it there is paying for all the rest of the stuff happening. I get that. But when you have a platform this big and you're making an advertisement, it still needs to be a good advertisement. This is the Super Bowl. Don't just bring a normal commercial, bring a fucking crazy commercial.
Yeah. Yeah, and then back to the question of who won E3, I do want to give a shout out to the indies, because there were quite a few indie showcases that we sat through and watched, and there are so many different indie games this E3, way more than I think any E3 past, where I was like, shit, I really want to play that. Like Loot River was one that Andy kept shouting out, where it was like a Tetris game combined with like a top-down action game. Like that game looked really cool. There was Fallen Aces from the E3 indie showcase yesterday that looked really, really cool. That has a voice actor who's a TikToker that I follow that I wasn't expecting to end up in this game, but like what it had that really cool thing of fuck, okay, I really want to support this thing. I didn't know this game existed before yesterday. There was Fire Girl, which looked really cool, Robodunk, Unmetal, Bullets Per Minute, Musical Story, Phantom Abyss showed up, Toem, like the Ascent was at Xbox's thing, and indies more than ever this E3 I think really came up and really shown in a way where it's very difficult for me to say this is a bad E3. Maybe for your AAA announcements, maybe there were people out there that weren't satisfied, but I got so much out of this E3 in terms of games I want to play in the future. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's all about learning about something new. It's all about getting hyped about something new, and it's all about looking forward to what I'm about to like the next game I'm about to play. And for me, this E3 really accomplished that. And so shout out to E3 2021. It's only going to get better from here. Tim, people can go over to patreon.com/kindafunnygames where they can get the show ad free. But guess what? If you're listening to this, you didn't. So here are some ads. This show is brought to you by Burrow. Most of us haven't found our forever home, which makes buying furniture a double-edged sword. You're either buying some cheap futon that you'll just leave out on the curb someday, or you're investing in an expensive sofa that might last forever, but definitely becomes a pain in the butt when it's time to actually move. You think someone would have figured out how to create quality furniture built for the way we actually live, wherever we live? Well, someone has. Burrow. Burrow makes furniture easy to shop for. Shop for everything you need for your living room online. No far-flung warehouses, no high-pressure salespeople. Plus, Burrow's world-class support team is available for you whenever you need. Burrow makes furniture easy to assemble, easy to move. Burrow's innovative modular design and super helpful instructions makes assembling and disassembling your furniture quick and hassle-free. And when it's time to move, your Burrow furniture won't hold you back. It's furniture designed for the way you live. Their credenzas are actually tall enough to fit next-gen consoles standing vertically. Their award-winning Nomad sofa has a built-in USB charger for all-day power. It makes things fast with free shipping on every order. Burrow can save you an average of $100 on large items like a couch and a logistics headache. Right now, you can get $75 off your first order at burrow.com/games. That's Burrow, BURROW.com/games for $75 off your Burrow purchase. Burrow.com/games. Welcome back. Let's talk about story number 2. Cyberpunk 2077 is finally coming back to the PlayStation Store. This is from Addie Robertson at The Verge. CD Projekt Red says Cyberpunk 2077 will return to Sony's PlayStation Store on June 21st, slightly more than 6 months after being removed. As Polygon notes, the news came in a regulatory disclosure by Cyberpunk 2077's developer, CD Projekt Red's parent company, saying Sony had agreed to reinstate the game. A CD Projekt Red spokesperson declined further comment about Cyberpunk 2077's return, including what potential bug fixes or other updates the new version offers. In a statement to Polygon, Sony confirmed the news, but said that it still doesn't recommend playing the game on PS4. Quote, users will continue to experience performance issues with the PS4 edition, while CD Projekt Red continues to improve stability across all platforms. Sony Interactive Entertainment recommends playing the title on PS4 Pro or PS5 for the best experience, a spokesperson says. CD Projekt Red executives have said they frequently updated Sony on fixes for Cyberpunk 2077's myriad bugs and performance issues since the game was pulled from the store on December 17th, 2020. The studio has released numerous patches for its console, PC, and Google Stadia editions in late May. Joint CEO Adam Kaczynski told investors there'd been visible progress on stabilizing the game, but Kaczynski said Sony would have to make the final call. Tim, it's finally happening. Cyberpunk 2077 is coming back to the PlayStation Store. What does this do for you?
I mean, honestly, this is just kind of like, all right, I guess it's happening. Hearing him say it's quote visible, there's visible progress. Like, I'd hope so, right? And also them just being like, yeah, hey, don't play it on the PS4. It's like, okay, did you fix this?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's crazy hearing that from Sony too. This very much feels like them basically shaking hands and being like, or not even shaking hands. Shaking hands would be the wrong way to put it. It feels like them, I guess, coming to an agreement of like, all right, we gotta get this thing back on the store. I guess how are we gonna do this? Like, it feels like PlayStation barely even wants this back on the store.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly.
I mean, look, like this has been a disaster since day one. Here we are, like half a year out from it. Like this is a story that I don't think any of us could have called a year ago. You know, that Cyberpunk would be taken off of PlayStation's online store for half a year. Like that's just unbelievable. You know, the quality of the game, that's a little bit more like everyone expected it to be good, but there's always a chance things are bad. But this type of news story is just unbelievable. But here we are believing it, having to deal with it, and them adding it back. Like I hope that the news is better than this, and they're just trying to downplay it to like, you know, just be like, and then it'll be a pleasant surprise if it works.
The news ain't better than this. Like, I think that's why this is being announced in a very, very non-celebratory way. Them coming back and Sony giving the statement of, yeah, don't play this on your base PS4, just play it on your PS4 Pro. Like that feels very much like we're all just gonna take this L together and just put this game back up. I'm shocked it's back, period. I am shocked it is back on the PlayStation Store. Yeah. Given how PlayStation responded so quickly and given that it's been off for so long. I was expecting that the next time we'd see Cyberpunk 2077 on PlayStation would have been with an official PS5 version. And even that, I had a little bit of doubts. Even that, I'd be like, I wouldn't be surprised if PlayStation was like, nah, fuck them. You know, they fucked with our refund policy, and so no. The fact that we're seeing it surprised me a little bit, but you know, again, it's a whole weird situation that it's unlike anything we've seen before in this space. A game this big being
Yeah.
taken off the PlayStation Store for 6 months straight.
It's crazy, man. And you know, it's very telling that we got WitcherCon coming up. You know what I mean? It's not
Hmm.
CyberCon. And that's kind of crazy to imagine. Like Cyberpunk felt like the biggest thing possible, and now it just kind of feels like this thing that Sony just wants to move past from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna keep on the lookout for this one because I do wonder what the future of Cyberpunk is, because CD Projekt, they paint it as one of their pillars. It is supposed to be The Witcher and it's supposed to be Cyberpunk as their two main focuses, and they're building stuff around that. There's still the idea that they want to put multiplayer into Cyberpunk as an additional mode, and I wonder if we ever get there. But I think that's one that I guess we'll just all have to be part of the story and pay attention to as the story goes.
Absolutely. And like one last thing I want to say is like we are somehow
Mhm.
still just in the beginning of this story. Like there is
Yeah,
so much more that they're going to add with the actual next gen updates and like going back and stuff. And like, yeah,
there's a
one
roadmap.
day there's a good game in this. And I feel like with the roadmap, it could end up being a fantastic game. When's that going to be? Is it
Yeah.
going to be in the next 5 years?
Tim, speaking of what the fuck story number 3, Rare's Everwild has been completely rebooted. This is from Andy Robinson at Video Games Chronicle. Rare's Everwild has been completely rebooted following the departure of its creative director, VGC sources have indicated. The original IP was a notable absentee from the Xbox and Bethesda showcase on Sunday, especially considering Rare debuted new trailers for the game at each of Microsoft's previous two big events, the Xbox Game Showcase last July and XO19 in November 2019. And according to our publishing sources, it could be a while before fans receive a significant update on the title, and even long before it even releases. Video Games Chronicle understands that last year's departure of creative director Simon Woodruff, first reported by us, first reported by Video Games Chronicle, I should clarify, has led to a complete overhaul of the game's design and direction, as well as significant changes to its senior leadership. According to people with knowledge of Everwild's development, the game's design has essentially been, quote, restarted from scratch, end quote, which means it'll likely be several years before it releases. We're told that Everwild's development team is now, quote, optimistically targeting a 2024 release that Rare's most senior creative employee, designer Greg Mails, has been brought in to lead the reboot. Mails is arguably the most decorated designer in Rare's history, aside from the founding Stamper brothers. Since 1989, Mails has led design on some of the studio's biggest hits, including Donkey Kong Country, Banjo-Kazooie, Viva Pinata, and Sea of Thieves. According to people familiar with its development, Everwild's small team has struggled to define a clear direction for the title beyond its striking art style and soundtrack. As of last year, the game was a third-person adventure with God game elements, we were told. One person said that, in particular, a mandate from Rare's leadership to not have any combat in the game had led to roadblocks in design. Last year, studio head Craig Duncan admitted that Rare hadn't discussed Everwild publicly much because it was still exploring the title's core themes, how the title's core themes would translate into gameplay. Quote, "We learned a lot from Sea of Thieves," he told Polygon. "At its heart, we love the idea of Sea of Thieves and players creating stories together." End quote. Tim, what the fuck is going on? Like, what? How?
I mean, I'm not surprised at all. You know, I
Hmm.
called this on Gamescast a couple weeks ago. I don't even remember when it was, but I think we are doing our predictions and we're talking about will we see
Yeah.
Everwild, and I was like, no, like there's this game I don't even think is real, and I don't know if it's going to come out. And like this to me, I'm like, yeah, I still don't know. Like they're saying the rumors are 2024 or whatever. It's like we'll see,
I'd
we'll
be
see.
surprised if it eventually comes out at this point.
Yeah,
Like, I think
I
this might turn into vaporware.
I think it'll turn into vaporware, and I don't think that that's necessarily the end of the world. It's complicated because you know people always want new IP, but we also need to support old IP and not just like let it die. And I would not be surprised at all if this team ends up working on Banjo-Kazooie, if they
Yeah.
like whatever this turns into a Banjo-Kazooie game when all is said and done.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes me sad a little bit too, because I think there was something there in terms of the art style. Like when they revealed Everwild, there are quite a few people that took to it because it looked like a cool thing, and it's coming from Rare, and it's coming off of Sea of Thieves, and with Rare riding this wave, no pun intended, of having put out a game that was able to attain an audience and have a promising future. That game now has Pirates of the Caribbean content being added to it. With Rare being able to do that, I think there was promise in the idea that, oh, cool, maybe they're gonna put out another game and get back to being that dope ass rare studio that we love. And Everwild struggling like this, it being revealed maybe way too early, it seems like, all of the above, I think is just it's a bummer, but I also don't think it's the end of the world. Like I wouldn't mind if they got to the point where they're like, hey, we cannot figure this out. The vision was for it to not have combat, and we don't know how we're gonna make that work, and so we are just gonna work on a Banjo-Kazooie or on a different game instead. I think that could be, I think that would be the right move here. But it's already announced, and so maybe they keep working on it, and maybe we'll see what comes of it. Who knows?
Yeah, totally.
Tim, we have one more news story. Story number 4. Don't expect Sports Story anytime soon. Sidebar Games tweeted this out on Twitter this morning. Sports Story mini update. Some parts of the game unexpectedly grew quite large. The tennis part now has a full career that spans multiple zones. We decided we have no choice but to see it through and look forward to sharing the results of our struggles. We think it was worth it. So, Tim, I know me and you are both excited for some Sports Story, but they got to work on tennis. They got to expand the tennis. Tennis is looking real promising for them.
I love that that they care this much. Like even in their tweet, the way they're straight up just saying, just like, hey, sorry, it's a tough choice, but we have to see this through. It's like, good for them, man. Make the game that you want to make, especially on this indie side, especially for what this is. Because guess what? New IP. The next thing once it comes out and is reviewed well, it's not a new IP anymore. You want the sequel. That's a good thing. We are very excited for Sports Story for that exact reason. And it coming out, like, I really want to see it be a market improvement over what Golf Story was. And I think that this could hit hard with people, especially with how many more units of the Switch are out there these days, where, Golf Story, the first one, had that real big boon of people just wanting something to play after Breath of the Wild was done. But now people are like itching for this. They want this type of experience, and they're looking forward to it in a way that is previously rare for indie games, but it's becoming more and more common a thing of they put out a hit and then people are looking forward to the next thing. So when indie showcases, what's really cool, Bless? Mm-hmm. I imagine that by next E3, when there are indie showcases happening, more so than ever, there's going to be this same type of fervor of, oh man, I hope Hollow Knight Silksong's there. I hope that Sports Story's there. I hope that XYZ. And it's like, there's going to be a whole bunch of things we're looking forward to. And that's already, we're seeing hints of it. But like, there's going to come a point where I don't know who's going to nail it. And it might never be nailed. It might be in 10 different places over 10 different days and different showcases. But I do think that there is a world where we are equally excited for some type of indie game stream than we are the big dogs.
Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, you look at I forget which of the indie showcases it was on Sunday. I think it might have been the Future Game Showcase. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where it closed out with a new game from the folks behind Telling Lies and Her Story. And that's obviously not an announcement for everybody, but for me, when I was in the call while I was watching it, I was like, oh shit, that's really cool. I love that announcement. It kind of speaks to your point of, more than ever, we're seeing follow-ups and we're seeing people build identities. Like, think about how much people love Toby Fox as a creator, and people loved Undertale and Deltarune, and how people have fervor for the next chapter or for the full Deltarune game. You see how much people
Maddie plays games.
Oh yeah. I mean, you look at that. You look at how much people ask for the Cuphead DLC, or how much people ask for Hollow Knight Silksong. It's super cool to see even something like Sports Story / Golf Story, which is fairly smaller than those games, but does have this core audience to it that really looks forward to it and appreciates these updates. Like, I look at this and I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, take your time. I'm sad I'm not going to play it soonish, but at least you're making the game of your dreams, and at least you're making something that is hopefully going to come out and feel full and not feel rushed and feel like something cool, fresh, and neat. And I think, coming off of story number 3, talking about Everwild and how we're kind of in the dark on that game and it's being revamped and all that stuff. I think this is an example of how to do it right, where development of games change during development. There's feature creep, there's things that don't work, there are visions that change. Communicate what that is, communicate what's going on, give us an updated timeline, and keep working. And for Everwild, we've not been getting clear updates, which is what makes that Everwild story kind of frustrating. Nintendo came out with Metroid Prime 4 that one time and was like, hey, we're literally restarting development, just so you guys know. And that was a refreshing thing. Bummer news, but at the very least, we're getting more info and a clear idea of, cool, let's not anticipate this anytime soon. And also, okay, and we know what's going on. Everwild, us not knowing what's going on is a bummer. Sports Story, us knowing what's going on, and it seeming like a promising thing that's going to lead to a better game. Such a cool thing, and I love that for them.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Tim, I can't wait for Sports Story, but it seems like it's just so far away. If I wanted what's coming out to mom and pop shops today, where would I look?
The official list of upcoming software across each and every platform is listed by the Kinda Funny Games Daily Show hosts each and every weekday. We had a nice vibrato in there.
Yeah, Kevin was having the time of his life just now.
I shook
Out
my
today,
face real hard to make that noise.
I love that. Out today, we got the Elder Scrolls Online console enhanced for PS5 and Xbox Series X/S. We got Among Us for Xbox Series X and Xbox One. We got Strange Brigade for Switch. Iron Fish first public demo is available today on Steam. Online ordering is open today to consumers for all the new... Okay, this is a different one. Hold on. Let me say that again. Online ordering is open today to consumers for the all-new Atari VCS PC/console hybrid gaming system. So if you've been waiting for that Atari VCS, it's getting closer. It's coming out. Probably. New dates for you. We got Spirit of the North Enhanced Edition. That'll be releasing on Xbox Series X on June 29th, 2021. Tim, folks can go over to patreon.com/kindafunnygames where they can get the show ad-free, but they can also write in with their questions, just like Derek Smith did. Derek Smith, aka Canyoudigglet, writes in and says, regarding E3 announcements, are companies damned if they do and damned if they don't? If you have a conference but don't announce anything big, you get slammed. But if you decide not to hold a conference at all, everything asks where they are. Or I guess they mean everybody asks where they were. I would always argue that you shouldn't hold a conference unless you've got something big. But is this a lose-lose situation for some companies? Hashtag bring back the KFGD top 5. Tim, is it a lose-lose companies if they don't have something to show and they don't show up to E3?
In a real way, no, it's not lose-lose. In what he's presenting here, sure, yeah, totally. I mean, you're only winning if you have the dope shit to announce, but even then, people are still going to be like, oh, where was this? Where was this? Where was this? But that's just because we care. That's just because we want to like these things, and we're looking forward to more of the things that we love about video games, and getting more specific, what we love about Capcom games or Xbox games or Nintendo games, et cetera, et cetera. And all those can mean very different things. I think that it is very clear that we have matured as an industry, both on the games media side and the game dev side, where there are kind of buckets. And I feel like as time goes on, more and more buckets are added of types of announcements and ways to present them. So either there's the key things we're looking for. Normally, an announcement of the game being one of them, right? Gameplay, a CG trailer is one. Gameplay demo is another. Release date is another, right? If you don't have one of those things to add for your game, maybe you shouldn't be doing anything, right? But then you have to add, it can't just be one. You need a whole bunch. And that's where the pacing of a showcase starts to play out, where you kind of want a nice mix of all the things, because in a perfect world, you're trying to tell your audience, hey, fan of this thing that we are trying to sell to you, here's what we're going to give you now. Here's what we'll give you then. And here's what we can give you way later. Get them hooked. So it creates a cycle. So we have an understanding of what to expect next time there's a showcase and what we're going to be playing in between that and what we're hoping to be playing in a long time. And I think that that's where, especially given where we're at the world right now, you know, PlayStation kind of coming through and just being like, we're not going to be part of this. Like, yeah, we can all keep raising our hands and be like, oh, where's PlayStation? Like, why aren't PlayStation here? It's like, well, they're not here because they decided. They chose that because they probably looked at what I just said and were like, yeah, no, we don't need to do this right now. That doesn't make sense for us. And, you know, that sucks because in a perfect world for all of us, guess what? There would be just like a rule that everybody has to bring their most banger announcements for just E3. No announcements the entire year. It's only E3, 1 week, everyone announcing everything. We'd love that. That's not the world we live in anymore. It hasn't been for a very, very, very long time. So with that, I think everybody just kind of is doing their own thing, and they need to really ask themselves, what is the point of this? And are we going to achieve that the way that we are presenting our information?
I think it is about setting expectation and communicating effectively. When you look at who showed up at this E3 and who didn't need to show up, nobody would have said anything if Capcom wasn't here.
Yeah,
Nobody, like nobody would have made a comic. Nobody would have said anything if Koch Media wasn't here. Nobody would have said anything if Gearbox wasn't here, right? Like nobody's forcing anybody to be at E3. And I think that is very much for a specific tier of developer and publisher. When it does come to the big guys like PlayStation or Xbox or even EA or Ubisoft, you look at EA and EA is not doing anything until July, and that's not going to be part of E3. I believe that's part of Summer Games Fest. Correct me if I'm
it
wrong,
is.
but yeah, and they don't like they're not at E3, but nobody is asking the question, "Oh, what's going on with EA? Why isn't EA here?" EA has communicated effectively. They've told you they're going to be here in July. They're going to have stuff for you to show there. And even if they weren't, right? I think it is about being clear with your audience in terms of why, right? Like if EA is not showing up in the summer at all, then I think that would have to be a blog post of, hey, just so you know, we're still working on things, but we're head down because we have a few cool things in the works. And I think that's what you do in order to satisfy the audience. PlayStation has been absent from E3 for quite a while now, and I think that's a thing that we now come to expect. We still ask the question every now and then: are they going to return? Should they be here? Those are conversations that perk up. But for the most part, I think they've also done a good job of being like, no, we'll talk on our own terms. That's how we do things now. We're PlayStation. You're going to tune into us when we do a state of play, and you're going to be fine with it. And for the most part, that has worked. They had a state of play a few weeks ago, and we're very happy with what they had to show about Horizon Zero Dawn. We've been happy about them showing off games like Ratchet and Clank, Rift Apart, at previous state of plays, and they've done a good job of proving that they have their own cadence and they communicate it pretty well, right? And there's still that anticipation of, well, is PlayStation going to do anything this summer? Period. But I think that kind of plays back into the thing of we're not asking that because they're not at E3 necessarily. I think we're just asking that because we're looking forward to what PlayStation has next. We're looking forward to when they're going to make the next big announcements, and I think that's a decent place to be at. I think being able to have your own thing or speak on your own terms and not feel beholden to showing up during a specific week is a very fine and oftentimes a very powerful thing.
It is. And it's interesting. Konami, right? They were supposed to have a showcase and then they were like, you know what? We're not doing it. We're not ready. And like that's
Perfect
an
example.
interesting thing there. And looking at Capcom and looking at Gearbox, which are two that we are shitting on. I lovingly refer to it as Crapcom because I'm timid. I can't resist
Damn.
bad puns. But
Damn.
when you look at that, it's like, okay, what did they show? There was some cool games, and it's like, well, Monster Hunter Stories with the Monsties was also at Nintendo's show, so they could have just not had their Capcom show. And then on the other side for Gearbox, it's like, well, the Wonderland game was at Summer Game Fest, so didn't need this. And like, of course, there's always the argument of, oh, well, why would they turn down free publicity? It's like, it's not about that. It's just that the publicity could have been so much better if this was presented in a way that was a little bit not just more defined, but like appropriate and hype, honestly, exciting, interesting, add some level of more information than we got in the other showcases we've seen these games. And we talked about it a lot this week, but I think there is a benefit for some indie games being shown over and over and over because that builds an awareness with us where we're excited to see more of the 10 different games you were talking about earlier.
Shout out to Campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So I don't know. It's all over the place for me, especially with Capcom, where it's like Village just came out. They could have just not been at E3. No one would have been like, where are they? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, nobody right now is like, what's Capcom up to? Like what, we haven't seen them forever. Like they've been releasing games. We know what they're working on. So I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, folks can go over to Patreon, not Patreon. You can go over to kindafunny.com/you're-wrong, where you write in, let us know what we got wrong as we got it wrong, so we can correct it for those watching later on YouTube and listening later on podcast services around the globe. Tim, would it surprise you that we apparently have no you're wrongs? And
No?
I know the you're wrong sheet is working because somebody wrote in to ask, have you heard about 2 Point Hospital?
Hilarious.
Sheet is empty.
Hilarious.
This is a rarity. This is a rarity. I'm shocked.
It's fantastic.
That can't be right. But it's me and you. It's me and you, which means
Dream team.
we can't be stopped. Tomorrow's hosts for Kinda Funny Games Daily are me and Andy, so get hyped for that. If you're watching this live on Twitch, we're done for the day. We got nothing else going on because this was the last thing. We're of course recording later than we used to, and you got a full day of content between a Nintendo Direct, a Gamescast, and an actual full-on Twitch stream. So After this, I'll say everybody go watch GameSpot Play for All Showcase. I've heard there's supposed to be some very cool games over there, including She Dreams Elsewhere, which is a game that I'm very much looking forward to. So go check that out. Of course, this has been Kinda Funny Games Daily, each and every weekday at 10 a.m. live, right here on twitch.tv/KindaFunnyGames. We run you through the nerdy news you need to know about. We have no Patreon post show for this episode specifically because we're still in E3 week, and so we are very tired after doing a bunch of content. We hope you understand. I've been Blessing. That's been Tim motherfucking Geddes. Until next time, game daily.